Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. You know, my little town's getting a little spicy. Last night, a guy, I think his last name, Fernando Silva. That's what I think his name is. Let me verify that. Yeah, Fernando Silva shot at a cop, state police cop, with an AR-15. Fired 50 rounds is what they're saying. They captured him today in the same area. Well, not the same area. In our town, in our county. And it just goes to show you that stay strapped or get clapped goes all the time. It does help to know that you can patch holes or plug holes or fix them or address them in some way, because you never know when this type of thing can happen to you. I woke up to this story and was like a little shocked. That's not what I wanted to talk to you about tonight. What I was thinking about was, you know, I get those, probably like all gun guys, I signed up for lists because I wanted to catch the deals. And one of those is, well, a couple of them actually, are websites that deal in parts kits. Now, if you don't know what a parts kit is, and I've talked about them a little bit, I think, a parts kit is basically the essential components of a firearm, historical or other. You know, there are AK parts kits or PPSH parts kits. There's HK21s, G3s, FALs. I've seen Styrogs. The list goes on and on and on and on, and there's pistols too. But what I was thinking about is the naivete of some of our people in the 2A. A lot of guys that are really big into tools, and they think that the shop set of tools they have are going to be able to put something like this together. And to some extent, that's correct for some of these. For others, you're going to need some specialty equipment. So I thought I would go over, you know, my experience with this, because what you have to do to make, say, an AK or build an AK from a parts kit, first you have to know the law. So the laws are, it has to conform to 922R, which means it has to have certain components, so many number of components anyway, that are American in origin. Okay, usually you start with the receiver and you build out, but do your math. You know, do what you're supposed to. Do your due diligence here, because this is one of those things that the ATF will absolutely hose you on. The easiest one to replace the part, and it's controversial because a lot of guys will say, well, why would I want to replace that? Because you want to conform to the law, otherwise you're going to go to federal pound me in the ass prison for this. But the trigger group, okay, any of these guns, if you buy like an HKG3, a lot of them come with the SEF giggle trigger stuff there. And if you put the gun together in its original military configuration, you're breaking the law because you don't have the said amount of components I just talked about. That's one thing. The other thing is, you know, firearms are cool, but we're basically setting off miniature explosions by our face and our appendages. And to that end, if you are not going to be very good at math and very good at process, you're not going to be good at this, because you're going to have to headspace said gun, whichever kit you buy. And that requires specialty tools. It also requires specialty knowledge that you're going to have to do some research on. The Kalashnikov comes to mind because I've built one. If you do not set the barrel in, press the barrel in far enough to headspace the rifle right, one, it will not run correctly if it's too tight. If it's too loose, so to speak, so that there's too much of a headspace, you'll start seeing premature wear, but you'll also have the chance of it going kaboom. Okay, so you're going to need a set of headspace gauges for whatever caliber you're going to try to build. The next thing is something like the AK. You know, you are going to need a mechanical press. You can do it with like kitchen table type tools that are available, but that's going to be an investment. It's also going to be an investment on how good your rifle comes out as an end product. In my case, my Kalashnikov I built, I wanted it to be as true as I could, conforming to 922R. So that means the trigger group is gone. In fact, there is no way that you can put a third pin in this unless you do the milling and do a ton of other things. Because I wanted to be as correct as I could be, getting the civilianized version of an AK-74. So I went with an American-made barrel. I could not find a chrome-lined barrel because this started happening right as Russia was getting stupider. They hadn't quite invaded Ukraine yet, so I was still able to get Russian stuff. But the barrel is one of those components that is better to use an American one because you can probably get it, for one, and for number two, there are laws pertaining to the barrel specifically being imported, so that's why most parts kits don't have barrels. Welders. Okay. So in the case of the G3, you're going to have to fold the receiver because it is flat that you're going to buy, is what that means. Is that so you're going to have to buy a jig, you're going to have a mechanical press, as stated before. You're going to press said flat into shape using that jig and that tool. Then you're going to have to weld the seams because that's how the gun was originally manufactured. Now, again, most of the civilianized or legal flat receivers you're going to get, they're going to be 922R compliant because this is one of those things, if you actually are making the receiver, counts as one of those part components that is made in the USA because you made it. The only thing is you're going to have to serialize it. So you're going to have to put some sort of serial number that's unique to that gun so that it can be tracked if it ever goes to that way. The other thing is, you build a gun. It is probably not worth anything for resale unless it's to another collector or someone who likes that type of gun. Because of those little quirks. Okay, people are married to brands. If I could have got an Ishmash AK when they were available back in the day, I would have got one, but I couldn't, so I made as close as I could to a Ishmash or a Kalashnikov concern nowadays in the United States. So that means I built my receiver. Okay, and when I say I built my receiver, I folded it. I welded in the rails for the Kalashnikov. I heat treated said metal again so that it was the right, hardness, so that when I riveted it, it didn't crack, because that's a thing with AKs specifically. That goes to rivet tools. If you're building a Kalashnikov, that press, there are tools that you can use to put the rivets in there, but there are also hand tools that you can get, or hand jigs, pieces, parts that you can add to tools that you can purchase. To crush the rivets that you're going to need to do to hold a rifle together, like a Kalashnikov. That mechanical press, if you're looking at G3s, you're going to have to press the barrel into the trunnion. Then you're going to have to weld the trunnion into the receiver you folded and welded, and you're going to weld that trunnion into there. And you're going to pin the barrel so that you can head space it. You're going to head space a G3 with feeler gauges, and you're going to go use different size bearings based on the trunnion itself. If the trunnion's good and brand new, shouldn't need anything more than like their standard bearing that you're going to use, because that's what actually locks up in the trunnion for a G3 rifle, because there's no gas system, right? So you head space it with feeler gauges to make sure there's the right length of clearance between the bolt head and where the bolt carrier group is. You can see the locking piece in there. You'd have to dry fire the gun, of course, and then use those filler gauges, and that tells you what size bearing to make it better. This is something you can do with SetMe. Don't take my word for it. There's about 1.5 billion videos, because that's how I learned how to headspace a SetMe, and that was my first experience with a roller delayed gun. They're good guns. You can buy SetMe kits right now for $120 I saw last time, depending upon when they're on sale. That's if you're wanting a SETME or a G3 style roller delayed gun. The difference between a SETME and, say, like a G3, they have about 80-85% parts compatibility. The real difference is kind of semantic. It's in the trigger group mostly, and where the hangers for the barrel and the cocking pieces are, or the cocking tube specifically for that style of gun. Those are usually the big differences with SETME. The bolt carrier groups are dramatic, well, not dramatically, but definitely different. So there's some minor issues there. I believe I used extractors, pins, rollers, locking piece, but the bolt face itself was different. And I know the bolt carrier group itself was longer. And the SETME, you can get a cleaning kit in the... that's one of the differences with the G3s. I digress. But the other tools you're going to need, I mean, you think about it, you may have a welder. You may have a mechanical press. Do you have headspace gauges? Do you have a good set of punches? Do you have a good set of screwdrivers? And when I say that, not ones that are rounded off anywhere. And a lot of times you're going to need the exact right flathead for a lot of these. Remember, some of these guns, if you're rebuilding them historically, you're using those original screws or flathead screws. So you want to make sure you don't mushroom them out, especially on the new build you're doing. Then there's wood finishing. If one of these gun kits you get has wood furniture you want to put back on, or you want to dress it up yourself, you're going to need all those tools that you would need to refinish wood. Sandpaper, sanding stuff, finishing, like brushes, whatever stain you're going to use, and varnish if you're going to use varnish or another type of finish. But you're going to need all that stuff too. When you get a parts kit, you're going to learn what Cosmoline is. So I've spoke about this before on here. Cosmoline is a very thick packing grease that's used to ship firearms. And historically, it's a protectant that's used against rust. It's a rust inhibitor. And when they get these parts kits in Europe or Africa or wherever the hell they come from, they pack them in Cosmoline, or at least the key components, to keep the ocean or whatever, the elements from causing any finish wear. You're going to have to take that stuff off. And you can do it the redneck way with gasoline if you want to die and get high. Or you can do it with, like, parts cleaner. You can do it with brake clean. I've seen it done with that. It's just going to take a lot of time and effort. And old toothbrushes are really good for this. What else are you going to need? That's, a lot of it has to do with knowledge. Before you ever jump into that big pond to do something like this, I did research for years, no joke, on what I would have to do to assemble a Kalashnikov before I took the jump to do it. Up to that point, I had built a few AR-15s, and I say assembled a few AR-15s. I've built a Kalashnikov, I can say that now. I've assembled many AR-15s to this point, and with that, there comes the same thing. You need knowledge. You need an armorer's wrench. That's mostly what you're going to need. I would recommend some punches. I would recommend some screwdrivers. And I would recommend a lot of knowledge and a single headspace gauge. A light hammer for those pins, specifically the one that you're going to use to, and nowadays you don't necessarily need to do this because they have screws, but where the ping pong paddle is on the left-hand side of the gun of the AR-15 that releases the bolt carrier group to slide forward to, after you do a swap of a mag, or if it just ran dry, whatever, that piece is holding the bolt carrier group back. But that little piece has a pin that goes through it, and it's a bitch to fuck with. If you've, during your first AR-15, you're going to bitch at that, and you're going to bitch at those little detent pins that like to go sparkling off into the wilds with the spring in your buy extras of those if you're building ARs. Because if you don't, the first two won't materialize for like 9 months. And then your wife or you will find them when you're vacuuming, and it's not fun. The little spring can really be a bitch. Anyway, those types of things are what I'm talking about. If you want to jump into that, if you really want to get into learning how to finish a gun, I'd actually recommend you going and buying one of those build kits like for a Kentucky long rifle or a Hawkins type black powder gun, because, well, I had a ton of fun teaching my sons how to build said gun, but two, how we bonded sanding, and finishing wood and bluing the actual barrel so that it wasn't in the white. Teaching them how to do that type of thing, that is kind of cool. I assembled an AK, another AK that my son now owns, 20-year-old, and that's the first rifle he wanted. Go figure. I ordered that gun when PSA was marketing this thing called a build-it-your-own AK kit. Okay, and Robski had just done his burn down, and I was like, okay, this gun's pretty much good to go anyway. So I thought this would be a good entry to learning how to assemble an AK. What you get is a barreled receiver that's fully ready to be populated. It's head spaced with its bolt carrier group and bolt, so you didn't have to learn any of that stuff. You do have to put the trigger group in that you buy with said kit. That was about as much AK knowledge, and if you've done that, like cleaned it and done that type of stuff to your Kalashnikovs, you already know a lot about that anyway. But that was the end of it, and putting the furniture on. Okay, that was assembling my first AK. Building an AK was entirely different. It took, I have a good friend, I'll give his first name because it's pretty generic, Bill. So Bill, he is a machinist and a wealth of knowledge. And he too is a fan of the Kalashnikov like I am. So I had a guidepost that when I said I wanted to build this and I had this kit, he was intrigued because he had never built a 74. So he was going to learn something new, slightly newer. And he would be able to walk me through the steps of doing what I needed to do. And Bill was the best encyclopedia I could get next to Mel. Mel63D, and he used to be on YouTube. He used to show builds on Kalashnikovs. That was his hobby. And that's when you start realizing that maybe spending $1,000 or $2,000 on said gun is probably more up your alley. Because if you want to spend time shooting and not knowing the knowledge that I have of said gun or said guns, buy your gun. Have the warranty. Do exactly the good thing. But if you want to learn something new and you actually want to take that step in there, for all intents and purpose, I bet I'm close to what an armorer can do. For Glocks, for AR-15s, and for sure for a Kalashnikov and the G3 right now. Because I've done a lot to those rifles. I have maintained them. I have torn them apart to their very nth degree and reassembled them. In the case of those guns that you just assemble, I have built Kalashnikovs now from nothing. But the core hearts that we needed from those parts kits. And I can tell you, it shoots the same. The only difference is it's a point of pride that I built it. The knowledge that I got from it, if you're a knowledge guy, that's where it pays off. Because then you get a lot of knowledge. You learn about what a burr can do inside of a trunnion of a Kalashnikov. You learn that how difficult it is to line up sights and a gas block to the trunnion and receiver and everything when you're building a Kalashnikov. There's a science and an art to this, and it's not a Western thing. It's different. And that's what I would tell you if you're going to venture out into something and try something different with one of these parts kits. Be ready for a lot of knowledge transfer, and get some before you attempt it. And make sure you look really hard at the tools and investment. Is it worth the knowledge to get that? Like, share, subscribe. Most importantly, be great.